I patiently waited for my turn in line at the store, nervously glancing at my watch. It had been a hectic week. Just a few days ago, I found out I had inherited a remote estate deep in the Amazon rainforest from an estranged relative I barely knew. As a botanist, the news was both exciting and a bit overwhelming. The Amazon was known for its unparalleled biodiversity, and the thought of a private estate within it sounded like a dream come true. Little did I know, that dream would soon turn into a nightmare. When I finally arrived at the estate, it was late in the afternoon. The dense foliage of the Amazon cast eerie shadows on the ground, and the air was thick with the sounds of wildlife. The mansion itself was an imposing structure, with ivy crawling up its stone walls and windows that seemed to stare back at me like hollow eyes. I felt a shiver run down my spine as I approached the front door, the reality of my isolation setting in. The next morning, I set out to explore the garden. It was magnificent, sprawling over several acres with a variety of plants I had never seen before. As I wandered deeper into the garden, I noticed that some of the plants seemed almost alive in a way that was unsettling. Their leaves rustled without wind, and some flowers appeared to follow my movements. I brushed it off as my imagination running wild, but a sense of unease lingered. Over the next few days, I made several unusual discoveries. Some of the plants had thorns that seemed to drip a red sap, and others emitted a faint, sweet smell that made me dizzy if I inhaled too deeply. At night, the garden took on a more sinister air. The rustling of leaves sounded almost like whispers, and I often felt like I was being watched. Despite my unease, my scientific curiosity kept me exploring. One evening, as I was cataloging a particularly unusual flower, I felt a sharp pain in my leg. Looking down, I saw a vine had wrapped around my ankle, its thorns piercing my skin. I struggled to free myself, but the vine tightened its grip. Panic set in as I realized the plant was deliberately attacking me. After what felt like an eternity, I managed to cut the vine with my gardening shears and stumbled back to the mansion, shaken to my core. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the incident in my mind, trying to rationalize it. In the morning, I decided to explore a different part of the garden. As I walked, I found an old journal tucked away in a dilapidated greenhouse. The journal belonged to my relative and detailed their experiments with the plants. The entries became increasingly erratic, talking about how the plants had a taste for blood and warning anyone who found the journal to leave the estate immediately. I spent the next few days poring over the journal. It became clear that my relative had been conducting grotesque experiments, using human blood to feed the plants. The plants had somehow developed a dependency on it, becoming aggressive and dangerous. I was horrified and knew I had to leave, but the thought of abandoning such a unique scientific discovery was hard to bear. My curiosity was battling with my instinct for survival. One night, I heard a noise outside my window. Peering out, I saw several plants slowly moving toward the mansion, their leaves and vines writhing like tentacles. They were coming for me. I barricaded the doors and windows, my heart pounding. The plants started to batter against the house, their thorns scratching at the walls. It was as if the garden itself had come alive, intent on consuming me. I realized I couldn't stay any longer. I waited until dawn before making my move. With a small backpack of essentials, I slipped out through a back door, avoiding the main paths of the garden. The plants seemed less active during the day, but I could still feel their presence. As I made my way through the dense jungle, I stumbled upon the remains of what looked like other explorers, or perhaps even victims of the garden. The sight was enough to quicken my pace. After what felt like hours, I finally emerged from the jungle onto a small dirt road. Exhausted and injured, I flagged down a passing vehicle. The driver, a local villager, took one look at me and nodded knowingly. Without a word, he drove me to the nearest town. It seemed like he had seen this before, or at least heard stories. I didn't care. I was just grateful to be alive. Back in civilization, I tried to report what had happened, but no one believed me. They thought I was hallucinating or suffering from jungle fever. The journal I had brought back was dismissed as fiction. It was frustrating, but part of me was relieved. I didn't want anyone else to go through what I had experienced. I decided to leave the academic world and take a quieter job, far away from any forests or gardens. Even though I had left the Amazon behind, the memories haunted me. I often had nightmares about the garden, waking up in a cold sweat. I would sometimes see plants moving out of the corner of my eye, only to find nothing there when I looked directly. It was as if a part of that cursed garden had followed me. I began to fear that I would never truly escape it. She nervously tapped her foot, waiting for the results of her job interview. It had been a few years since the incident, and life had mostly returned to normal. But as she sat in the waiting room, the receptionist's desk adorned with a small potted plant, she couldn't shake the feeling of unease. The plants around her seemed to whisper, reminding her that some secrets of the Amazon were better left undiscovered.